Captain Rush, right? Yeah. Hello, hello, and welcome back to Dark Shadbros. It has been a year. It's been
Since last year.
It has been a year. It's been a while since we've all seen each other, because the last episode that we did of Dark Shadbros, Michael was, I believe, you were out of town when we did the Burke Devlin episode, and the lovely and wonderful Nick Caputo was an honorary Dark Shadbro that day and joined us. He's going to be joining us again we'll do a foursome at some point. But it's been a while, so for those of you who are tuning in, and I hope some of you are, thanks for joining us, and thanks for supporting us and putting up with us. But this is a lot of fun. We're still trying to remember when our first episode was. You need to look that up, because I forget. Pardon me. Let's see. It's crazy. It's just crazy to me that it has been so long since we've done one of these, but it is good to be back. So I am one of your hosts, Peter Mack. I've been a Dark Shadows fan. Let's see. I was introduced when I was 4 years old during the NBC reruns back in 1982, and if you do the math, you're dead meat. And then discovered it, let's see, New Jersey Network shortly thereafter in about 1984, 85, and then on home video in 1990 through MPI. Started going to the conventions, started performing at the conventions, became very good friends with several of the stars, including the late Laura Parker, the wonderful Marie Wallace. Got to perform with Laura, Marie, and Nancy Barrett, actually. So it's been a fun ride, and we've made a lot of great friends in the time we've been involved in Dark Shadows fandom. I work primarily as a cabaret musical theater artist and a tribute artist.
May 3rd.
Oh, there we go. May 3rd. Thank you. I work primarily as a Judy Garland tribute artist. I actually just got back from Florida doing a big gig at the Century in Deerfield. What is that? Deerfield County, John?
Deerfield Beach.
Deerfield Beach. It was a whirlwind trip. So that is what I do. And now I'm going to turn it over to our other guest host here, Mr. Michael Panzerato.
Where's the green light? Oh, there it is. Hello. Hello, I am Michael. What's left of me? I'm currently being pummeled by a snowstorm that came from Florida. I've been a fan since I was very small. I think first grade, maybe? First or second grade? Anyway, I've been in love with the show ever since. It's an honor to be working with these two gentlemen geniuses. And I don't have much more to say. I do a lot of acting myself. I will tell you, the last thing I was involved with was called Escape from Earth, Lost in Space. Escape was an 84th episode, and it has been yanked from YouTube due to, a beef. I think a beef between some of the folks in charge. So we're waiting for that to get panned out. But keep your eye out. You can see me all over the place doing Zachary Smith. And I'm so happy to be here with these guys. And now to the phenomenally dressed, I kind of really want to know where you got that sweater from, by the way, Dr. The Brain Schaefer. DJ the Outfit Schaefer.
Hello. I'm DJ Schaefer. I'm Peter Mack's husband. That's my sobriquet for the moment. I'm also an actor. We live in Salem, Massachusetts. We are about to be pummeled with 8 to 10 inches of snow. I can deal with that. I cannot deal with the polar vortex, which is coming behind it, which is predicting minus 10 degree temperatures for 2 days. Real feel. So if I seem miserable, I am. All right. Now back to the show.
Oh, and as Mae West once said, a New England snowstorm is like a bad one night stand. You never know how many inches you're going to get and when they're really going to come.
Marvelous.
I would have loved to have seen Mae West on Dark Shadows. I would have loved to have seen
Oh, wow.
Mae West on Dark Shadows. I can just imagine it in my head.
There's a vampire.
Her, her and Dr. Her and Dr. Hoffman going rounds.
Right. Um, well, first of all, we have to talk more about that after the show. I am so sorry they yanked your project from YouTube. Was anyone from the show
Yeah.
involved? Was anyone from the show involved with it, or was it?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was a disagreement between the writer and I think that's in the producer, and I think that I'm sure it will resolve itself. But for right now, it's quite impossible to see.
Okay, we'll keep us posted on that. And yeah, he's Michael is an amazing Jonathan Harris tribute. Check him out because I know there's stuff. Are you on TikTok, which was gone and now it's back again, or where is your stuff?
No, sadly. And I was thinking of getting onto TikTok for not just that, but like doing some sonnets and some Shakespeare and stuff like that. I was going to do that.
Well,
Little
it's
bits
back
and things
now.
on it.
It's
So
back now.
yeah, I saw the I saw that this morning. So that's pretty cool. So you will be seeing me on TikTok shortly. And yeah, I appreciate it. It's crazy. You know, the arts. What can one say?
And you
Jonathan was a
just
huge fan of Mae West as well. By the way.
was he?
Oh, really?
Oh, he loved Mae West. Oh yeah, he would buy tickets and travel to see her.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
cool. Well,
That's
he was
wild.
wonderful. He was a class act.
Oh, that's my guy. One of my Jonathans.
One of your Jonathans. The other one
Right,
pertains to
right,
this. Now
right.
you saw Nosferatu, and
Yes.
I get the impression you were not overly impressed.
Okay, so in some aspects, first of all, the craftsmanship behind the actual shooting, the shots, and the acting was brilliant. Were brilliant. The I love the first part of the movie pre the Demeter and hitting into England. When they're yet in, they're doing the whole, because Nosferatu is Dracula. They're going the whole Harker to meet this eccentric count in Romania. I love all of that, and they actually pull heavily. Egger pulls heavily from real vampire lore and stories, like the vampire craze and what they used to do to the bodies of people they thought were. There's a whole great and gypsies that was wonderful. Just they lost it to me when they get to England, and it gets kind of drags a little bit for me. But the
Okay.
acting is brilliant. Skarsgård, I think, is going to be one of the next Peter Cushing, Vincent Price. That guy, everything he does is gold. I mean, he's a brilliant, and I like Nicholas Holt too, and the lady's all right as well. But it's. I saw the Wolfman too, if anybody cares.
I thought that had been shelved. I was like, wait a minute. I thought they had shelved that film, so that actually is out now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's out.
De-
It's I
that's
had
not
read
a
that it was going
rousing.
to be a
That's not a
remake.
rousing endorsement, by the way.
No, I read it was going to be a modern adaptation of the Lawrence Talbot story. The impression I got, this has its place. I read somewhere recently that not too long ago that horror. Now the landscape there has changed a little bit, and that what people find frightening now are like the YouTube things like Darkness Prevails and Nuke's Top Five, where they purport something may be true, this may not be true. This is some footage we got here. You decide. And they do these live shots of peeping around the corner, ghosts peeping around the corner, and it gives you the impression, particularly in the beginning, that you're stumbling into one of those stories and you're getting a peek. But it has, if you're looking for the old Wolfman, it has nothing to do with Lawrence Talbot or Sir John Talbot or even any relation to the story. It's a very American story. It's a very It's interesting. It's I have one major problem with it that I don't know if I should. I won't tell you, but it's go see it. It's worth seeing in the movie
Okay.
theater because of its the spooky parts of it. But
So we have to. We
you
haven't
know,
seen. We haven't seen Nosferatu. We haven't. We haven't seen the Wolfman. That'll be down on my list. What we have seen 3 times, and I know there's a lot of Dark Shadows. Wicked. Oh my God! If you have not seen Wicked, they should revoke your citizenship in this country. It is so good. It is so well done. Both of those women are incredible. Jonathan Bailey is worth the price of admission alone. Not just for his talent, but for the way he knows how to shake that tush. But there's not a bad apple in the bunch. And I think I was one of those people too who I was a little trepidatious about Ariana. Not that I didn't respect her talent, but man, does she step up to the plate in this film and shows that she is an actress. What she did with her voice to get into that Glinda, Kristen Chenoweth range. And the two of them have such impeccable chemistry together. You can't fake that kind of chemistry. So if you haven't seen Wicked, you need to go and see Wicked. I mean, if you stop and think about it, we never talked about this, but Angelique's descent is essentially Wicked. It's how did she become Angelique? This is more of a parallel universe. Most of us in the Oz field will say we don't take it as canon because it's not canon. I mean, if you're a diehard, you'll tell people the Wicked Witch of the West was evil. She was evil. L. Frank Baum created an evil Wicked Witch. But this is a very interesting what if. It's a very pertinent story at the moment. I don't have to tell anybody why. The author has given countless interviews in the last 2 of the book, not the play, but of the original novel, saying it is a very pertinent story, and he never set out to do that. I also find it pertinent to fandom, and there are certain Dark Shadows people out there who will know what I'm talking about you can't just say someone is a bad person and then take it as gospel.
Yeah.
And it's all of the, ooh, I'm blonde and I'm cute and, and butter wouldn't melt in my pretty little mouth. Elphaba is a scapegoat. And that's something that's, I find very, very prevalent in fandom and certainly in Dark Shadows fandom, that you can't believe everything that people tell you. Nobody bothers to get Elphaba's side of the story. And she flies off because she's like, well, nobody's going to believe me anyway. So I find it, I think there's a couple of folks out there.
It's true of all fandom.
Yeah.
But certainly in DS.
Yeah. Dark Shadows and Wizard of Oz. And yeah, it's,
Judy Garland.
Yeah. But if you haven't seen it, you're missing out. And it's still in theaters. I know it's on Prime, but definitely see it in a movie theater because to see the scope. And I think this ties in neatly with what we're about to talk about. There have been countless discussions about should there be a new Dark Shadows. They're shopping around a sequel series. John M. Chu took this Broadway show that's now in its 22nd year and is so beloved. And he did not destroy. It wasn't like, okay, we got to go in and rethink the wheel. We're going to make it look different. We're going to add different music. We're going to it stays in the context of what everybody loves, except that you can only do so much on stage. Now that it's a movie, he could open the story up and we can see things that we didn't see. So you need someone like that if we're going to have a new Dark Shadows, and particularly if it was to be a reboot of the stories we already know. You need someone who goes in saying, we have to appeal to the fans. That is why Wicked has made over $700 million. Because, unlike, I think, Mr. Depp and Mr. Burton, it wasn't like, we have to appeal to the masses. We can't, for the people that ran home from school, the convention, we can't appeal to them. You can't go into it like that. You got to go in saying we need to get the fans. And that is why this movie of Wicked works so well. So
agreed.
End of my rant on that. And this brings us to a remake that was done by mostly the original team, the NBC, Dark Shadows, that premiered January 13th of 1991. For myself, I had just gotten involved in fandom. I had been to my first convention in June of 1990, and by that point, Dark Shadows was already in the works in terms of this. It was already, I think the pilot had already been filmed. And there was someone representing NBC at the convention that year. I think it was June 6, 7, and 8 of 1990. And they said NBC had passed on it at that point. Everybody was upset, particularly Dan Curtis, but all the fans were really upset. They had a slideshow. They were like super security conscious. Everyone put away your phones. There weren't even, we didn't even have iPhones, at the time. Put away your cameras, and we got to see photos of the from the pilot. Then they played music, some of Robert Cobert's new music to them, and I think it was shortly after that NBC gave the thumbs up that it would be a mid-season replacement, because it was supposed to premiere in October 28th of 1990 was its original slate date, and then they pulled it. And apparently Dan Curtis was really pissed off because Brandon Tartikoff had been begging him all the time that he was editing War and Remembrance to come over and do Dark Shadows at NBC. So when it didn't get picked up, Curtis was really, really pissed. He was basically promised, we're going to do a pilot movie. If you look at the Dark Shadows ephemera on YouTube for NBC, you'll hear in the promos. It's called, Sunday, January 13th. Don't miss Dark Shadows, the movie. That's how they were touting it. But the guarantee was for that 2-hour pilot movie to go into a series. So, and we'll get more back into that later. But I think it's fair knowledge that Curtis didn't want to go back into the world of Dark Shadows. ABC asked him to bring it back as a soap opera in the 80s. He turned that down. I think Fox asked him to bring it back as a soap opera at one point. And I read in, I believe, Dark Shadows Resurrected, which is a great book, if you don't have it. It was edited by Jim Pearson. With the success of Beetlejuice, there was a deal on the table for a studio to do a campy Dark Shadows movie. We would eventually get one, but not until many, many years later. And I don't think Curtis was supposed to be involved with any of those projects, and that's why they never came to fruition. All I can say as a 12-year-old, having just fallen in love with the series on video, my MPI videotapes come every month by UPS, and knowing there was going to be a new Dark Shadows on television, I was so psyched and so excited for it. Now, that's my memory of it in the midst of coming to fruition. Michael, do you remember hearing about it? Do you remember watching? What are your memories about ever even hearing that it was going to be redone for television?
How I heard, I was at there's a local, a fairly successful chain of like 3 comic book stores at that time called Jeppy's Comic World. And my father, when I go with him on the weekend, very often Friday night we'd run over to the mall and I'd end up in that comic book store. And it was what's the name of that old magazine? Cinefantastique or something like that. Something or other.
Cinefantastique.
I was thumbing through that, and I still have it, I think, downstairs. It had that great still of Cross holding the cane outside. He's holding the cane, and you see the new ring. And I read, that's where, as soon as I saw that, I couldn't believe it. And that's how I found out that it was coming back. Then the night that it came on was a Sunday, right? It was a Sunday.
Sunday night.
I had just gone to, it was a dance. It was a school, like some kind of school function dance, which is odd because usually they were on Saturdays, but this was a Sunday, and I just came in, and I left. I think I left early to get home in time to make sure that I was riveted to the television in my bedroom, watching. It was a color TV, so I was happy as a clam. But yep, that's when I watched it. Rushed home from that dance to see the new show. It was great, very exciting.
We watched it. We sat down and we'd just be fresh for this podcast. We thought, well, let's watch it fresh. So we did that last night, and I had watched it about a year and a half ago. We usually try to binge watch it around Halloween time. Only being 13 episodes, it's really easy to binge it. I remember loving it the night that it was on. There were certain things that put me off at first. I wasn't thrilled with the reimagining of the theme. I thought it was too slow. I missed that kind of scary, very fast theremin thing going on. So that threw me a little bit. It took a couple of minutes before there were any waves crashing against the rocks. So I was like, okay, So I was a little bit more of a purist, thinking, well, no, it's got to be the way it's got to be the way it was. I fell in love with Joanna Going instantly. And I don't think they could have picked. There's only one other actress, I think, who could have pulled it off in terms of she and Joanna are very much could be like sisters, and that's Jamie Gertz. I don't know if she was ever considered for the role, but she has.
We should tell the audience who may not have seen this who Joanna plays.
Oh, Joanna plays Victoria Winters. Yeah, and as I came to find out, I'm trying to get my books here right. I don't know if it's in Resurrected or Shadows in the 90s, which is a concordance by Kathy Resch. Kathy did all those wonderful concordances for the show. That they actually passed over Joanna Going initially. She was dismissed. And then they said, let's look at her tape again or whatever. And Curtis said, we made a mistake. This is the girl for the job. And I think out of that pilot, I think Joanna, I would go out on a limb and say Joanna and Joseph Gordon-Levitt are the strongest of the cast. And that's not putting anything on Ben Cross. We'll get into Ben in a moment. But I think they're the strongest of the cast. That's just my opinion out of the pilot.
Interesting.
Fascinating. I can see why you say that.
I not that I think it's a bad cast. I thought everybody was very well cast. I mean, some people were thrown by, and I'm going to get her name wrong. Everybody does. I believe it's Elie Pouget, who played Maggie Evans. They reverted back to what Maggie was supposed to have been in that first year, certainly in the first few weeks, a very no nonsense, tough talking girl. And I actually kind of like it more with each viewing, watching her. I liked her Maggie because she was a kind of a, no bullshit. She and Willie are going back and forth in the pilot with each other. Kiss off, Maggie. And she's like, oh, I love it when you talk dirty to me, Willie. So
I
yeah,
think you're right about. I mean, I get it, and I think that Joanna. I always think that Joanna Going carried the pilot. I mean, Barnabas was the kind of she kind of carried it from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. It's interesting because they get through so much material so fast, which you can do in film. You can't really do that in a soap opera. Which begs the question, should Dark Shadows ever come back as a soap opera versus a nighttime show? And I know you can do more in a nighttime show, but I personally wouldn't mind it coming back in a soap opera type format because I think the theatricality of Dark Shadows lends itself to that soap opera medium. But, there's Vicky, and then within moments, you've got Willie. Well, he admittedly, Curtis took House of Dark Shadows and interwove it with stuff from the series. So there you've got Willie, and we'll talk about Willie for a moment because he's a complete 380. 360. I was never good with math. From Johnny Carlin. This is not the same Willie Loomis as Johnny Carlin. He's much more dim-witted, kind of a Neanderthal, but pitiable. I mean, what did you think?
He's comical. He's almost like a foil. in a lot of there's it's not in the pilot. You don't get but in the when he finds the picture of Angelique in the diary, in Sarah's diary, and she blows through the fireplace, and I thought that was great. The screaming, like the banshee kind of ghost that she would. I thought it was great, but he's hiding behind his legs like a dog, like a puppy. He's hidden behind, and I mean, Carlin played scared a lot of times, Adam, and all of that. But he was a different kind of. It was like, let's arm up. Let me get the rifle. Kind of frightened, not let's hide behind Barnabas. The only time I can think of that you got that out of him was when they went looking for Maggie during the Quentin thing, and Barnabas says, calm down, I don't sense any spirits here," or whatever. They're in the house, and Willie's terrified. "I sense no spirits here. Calm down, Willie." But it wasn't still not quite to that degree, and so I think, and Ben Loomis was comical too. Was
Yes.
much more comical character than much more than Ben Stokes. So, it is he is very different from far less serious.
Endearing. I mean, you really do. I mean, I felt bad for John Carlin once he's under Barnabas's thrall. Yeah, we've talked about this
Yeah.
when we talked, that he really is always caught between a rock and a hard place with him wanting to kill Maggie Evans and Willie trying to buy time with wanting to kill Burke Devlin, and Willie's trying to buy time, and you always see this look of anguish on his face, like, what did I get myself into? And at the same time, he's loyal to him. I mean, he truly is.
Yeah.
I think he actually does come to like Barnabas, even though he's his slave. But he's endearing because it's almost like he's on the spectrum.
Mm.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I got that. That's interesting. I I didn't think of that before. That's so true. He's kind of pitiable, much
Yeah.
more pitiable than Carlin. Even when he's being beaten, you feel less sorry for Carlin than you do this Willie.
I love Juliana McCarthy as Mrs. Johnson.
We have a comment from Renee Caps.
I knew Renee was, as soon as we mentioned Willie, I knew Renee was going to have something to say.
The guy played Willie as Renfield, and Carlin's portrayal was akin to Frid's portrayal of his character. They were men trying to deal with issues.
Yeah, he definitely has more of a Renfield quality to him. I would go along with that, Renee. Absolutely. I just mentioned Juliana McCarthy because one of the, in the original series, for those of you who haven't seen the first year, Mrs. Johnson is not a staple at Collinwood. She goes in as a spy for Burke Devlin as the housekeeper. In the new show, she's obviously always worked for the Collins family, and Willie is her wayward nephew, who she gets a job. And John and I were talking about, I guess maybe he came from a really rotten home life. Maybe his parents were abusive, possibly alcoholics. That's why he has the alcohol problem.
Right.
And Mrs. Johnson is trying to get him on the right path and feels bad for him, but also he's also causing trouble a lot of the time at Collinwood. And I liked the rapport that Juliana and Jim had with each other as aunt and nephew, especially as it goes on, which we'll get into in our next segment. But I love Juliana. Juliana actually said, I got the call that I was coming in to audition for Dark Shadows. And she said, we watched it every day, my daughter and I. Her friends would come over. They'd go up to her room, and I'd hear the music. And, woo! And so I got off the phone, and she said, I have an audition. And my daughter was like, for what? She goes, it's for Dark Shadows. And her daughter went, oh, get it. And she said, all right, honey, I'll do my best. And she got the role. But I loved her as Mrs. Johnson. She was very different than Clarice. She didn't come off as an old Maine curmudgeon lady the way Clarice did.
Mm-hmm.
Being a fan of the show, there's one thing I noticed in the pilot last night. Her reaction when she opens the door to Barnabas. I think she went in and watched that episode because her line readings are almost the same as Clarice's. We're not going to show any clips, by the way, guys, because it's Universal and they will more than likely pull this episode down if we do. even though it's for educational purposes.
However, we should note, and this is an important note.
Yeah.
Um, we're so excited that so many people are watching, so thank you for that. But Carrie Perwicka, she asked, she's never seen it. She asked if it's available to watch. It is on YouTube. I will post the link in the comments.
You can watch the entire NBC series free with ads on YouTube. And then if you go on YouTube, so there are deleted scenes, which we didn't watch last night. I haven't seen them in a while, but there's about, I think, 10 minutes of footage that was cut from the pilot, some of which are, I think, very pivotal moments in the show, but they had to cut them for time. And I think they wanted to put all the emphasis on Barnabas. But I was saying her line readings when she see, and we don't see Barnabas because they do the Hods, the creepy. This is very big in the pilot for the NBC Dark Shadows. It's that creepy peepee, that kind of handheld camera where it looks like somebody is looking. Dan Curtis was very big on this, particularly in Night of Dark Shadows. He would do that. It's funny when you see Victoria and Elizabeth and Carolyn at the foot of the great staircase, and it looks like somebody is watching them from up above, and you're wondering, is it David? Is it Sarah's ghost? So it gives it a very ominous feel that somebody else in the house is watching them, and who could it be? And they do that for Ben Cross's entrance, but I just noticed that all of Juliana's line readings are totally Clarice, and I wonder, when she's looking at him and you see the fedora, it's that kind of her cousin. Yes, her cousin from England. From England. Oh, yes. Come inside. And Juliana does the same thing. And I was like to John, well, it's because she's seen the portrait so many times. Whereas in the movie, Barbara Kaysen takes over for an under contract Clarice Blackburn. And she's very stoic and very, won't you come in, please? And they're having their dinner. I'll tell them you're here. But Juliana is kind of like, her Mrs. Johnson is shaking a little bit, that looks like the guy in the portrait.
Yeah, you get that feeling. And I think that's great. That decision, whether it was Clarice's or in the writing, or was genius for both actresses to take that kind of taken aback. What the hell am I looking at here? There's a guy with a cape at the door who looks just like, he's been cut out of time. And I do think, I agree with you 1,000%, Juliana McCarthy. First of all, I remember her from The Young and the Restless. She played Miss Foster.
Right.
Who was the mother of the villain Jill. And I remembered her from that. And I said to my Mom, get in here. Miss Foster is on Dark Shadows. But she's much sweeter.
Yeah.
She's much, which makes the flip so much bigger when she plays Aunt Abigail than it was with Clarice. When Clarice played Abigail, it was kind of like that same kind of cold, get away from me, kid, you're bothering me. Particularly like with Clarice's son. She was not thrilled or sweet to her son, and it was the same relationship. He was bad, he was getting into trouble, whereas Juliana McCarthy was sweet, and she was so happy when he got the job, and and are you and Mr. Collins doing all right over there, and all that kind of thing. You didn't get that from Miss Blackburn, so
I'm glad.
Actors, but
I'm glad you brought that up. It is like they took they said, we'll take Harry Johnson and we'll just weave them.
Right.
We'll just weave them into one because we're not going to go down that road. We'll just let Willie be the Harry Johnson out the gate. So I love Juliana. I do love Barbara Blackburn as Carolyn. She's the perception that most people have of Nancy Barrett, which has turned into folklore. I mean, obviously, Carolyn had been around the block once or twice. I think it's safe to say. She was not the virgin that Victoria was. But they really laid it on thick with Barbara Blackburn. And she is flirtatious with everyone, including Victoria.
I would agree.
Yes, I mean, she's Does she say? I'm trying to remember now. If it's something like, I'm right down the hall if you need me, or something like that. It's very, very flirty. It's like, okay, now we're going into Hammer world here.
She was doing the Betty White hip thing. Rose, what's wrong with your hip? I'm right down the hall. Shake it, shake it, shake it. Yeah, I got the same impression. Now it's a party,
And what we don't
Absolutely.
what we don't hear, it's in a deleted scene when she says, "Do you like to ride?" Which there's a joke in there, and she takes her down to the stables. There's a deleted scene where she drives her down, and we find out that Carolyn was living in Manhattan and doing modeling. So that's something that's cut, but it is out there to watch. Which is also interesting because Vicky came from a foundling home in Manhattan. So,
And two, the movie, I wonder if it was just an accident or if Burton borrowed that, because Carolyn in the movie says, "Mother, I'm going to New York. I'm going to, when I get out of here, or when I get whatever age I'm going." And Michelle Pfeiffer says she has a fantasy that I'm going to allow her to do this, and she says the mother has a fantasy that I'm not going to do it. I wonder if they pulled off of that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
All,
I wouldn't be surprised.
I thought about.
She's oozing sex. She is just one walking hormone. She's
Well, my favorite scene in the pilot, quite frankly, other than when you actually see him pull the jewel, something about when he pulls that chest of jewels out fascinates me. But since I was little,
fascinates me too.
Even the original
fascinates me too.
It goes to that, back to those pirate stories and Naomi and all that kind of stuff, and I love that. But when when they're at the club or the bar, and the guy says something, and she's like, "You're never gonna ride him," something about her brakes or her wheels or something like that.
Wheels, yeah.
But then they fight, and Barnabas kills both of them. I think that's so scary. He kills her and then kills the guy. That was another thing I kind of thought was cool with the pilot, was they updated Barnabas's look a little bit. He wasn't always in a suit. Sometimes he was a little bit more relaxed, and he looked great, but he would be in a turtleneck with the cape on, or he would be. I thought that was pretty cool too, that they moved him a little bit from just the suits all the time.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about the costumes.
We have a new audience member. His
Sure.
name is WD.
Hey, WD.
My favorite show. I seen it originally when aired. I was 13. I watched the original later on, so I grew up on the 91 show. Now I'm a huge DS fan, both shows and the two 1970s movies. WD, you should check out one of our previous episodes where we talk about House of Dark Shadows. So glad to have you watching. Thank you.
And for all you newbies, please, I was supposed to say this at the top of the show, but if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. Just click like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us a lot with building our audience viewership and that. So, and leave comments, questions. We want questions, obviously, during the panel. But if you're watching afterwards, submit questions or thoughts after that. Even for other topics for shows, we're always all ears. Getting back to what you were saying, Michael, about his look.
It's interesting because I thought it was, okay, this is just me, but I thought it was peculiar having the turtleneck with the smoking jacket. But that was just me.
When he's in the old house.
Mm-hmm.
When he's in the old house. Got it.
He was sleeping, right? Wasn't he? He just got out of the coffin.
He just got out.
Victoria was there. I think, wasn't he? Because he would wear the dressing gown to sleep in. I know that. And I know exactly the part you're talking about when he takes her to see the portrait.
Exactly.
He's got that great turtleneck on, right?
Which,
right.
by the
way,
way,
is odd to see.
There's a Dark Shadows blooper there when they walk into the room.
When they walk into Josette's room, and John caught it. I had never caught it. Go ahead, John.
Ben Cross you could see his reflection in the mirror.
They Lugosi'd him from Abbott and Costello Meet
Frankenstein. You know why? That must be that the mirror was lined with aluminum and not lead. That's the theory. If it depends on the lining of the mirror, and so that's how
that's convenient.
Isn't that convenient? Yes. I have a
Nice.
I have a theory about, but I had never caught it before. Well, okay, we've got to get to Ben Cross. So we're talking about Ben Cross. First of all, the scene that Michael just mentioned of him waking up, just so you know, that is the bowling alley, the old bowling alley of Greystone Mansion, which served as both Collinwood and the old house. That is where Barnabas's coffin room was. Let me go on record as saying I hated the coffin room. I hated the coffin. It was not nearly as what Cy Thomasoff created. I mean, there are blueprints for that casket because Cy created the casket. He was just an inch short on Jonathan's height. So Jonathan always had to cram himself into it. And Dan Curtis was too cheap to have a new one built. But that coffin and that coffin room were so distinct. I don't know why. And I don't blame Brian Remy, who was the set designer, because I know he was given a hard time to a degree. I don't want to say like he was badgered, but I think that was cheapness on the part of NBC as well as with Dan Curtis himself.
I have an explanation for that.
Yeah.
I think the actual coffin is still in the crypt, and that wooden coffin is a transfer coffin. That was my idea.
Okay. It's still a lousy coffin.
Well, the Frid coffin, I don't know who it was that designed Jerry Dandridge's coffin in Fright Night.
Yeah.
But that's what the coffin should have been. Something very ornate. And I think that they kind of ripped off of the Dark Shadows, that stacked look for Fright Night, the coffin. I think you can see like a shade of, and the red cherry wood resemblance and all that. You think, because the Collinses, they made so many in the original series, and I'm fanboying here, but they made so many comments in the first few days of Barnabas being set loose. Oh yes, Joshua Collins was very particular about his jewelry. It was almost part of his persona, and the Collinses would never this, and I know my family history because I'm a Collins, and I don't think they would have settled for a pine box. I think that they would have been super. I mean, look at the damn mausoleum with marble and rings everywhere and all that kind of thing. I think it was counter. It's almost like the turtleneck in the dressing gown. In the dressing gown with the turtleneck, the two have the shirt unbuttoned, if you will, or whatever. But I don't see Barnabas, that kind of thing. It was like I said to when we shot, and I said, no cane, no cape, no ring, no Barnabas.
No Barnabas.
You gotta have all. Yeah, that's not who he was. I mean, the cape, he was a throwback. He was a man who stayed where he was, but held on to his time. Those things all go together, I think. That's more characterization, I think, than set design. To me, I think that I would have been like, hey, I don't see him getting into that. Unless he was really pressed.
Can we talk about the jewels for a second?
Well, wait, before we go, I want to. But we got to talk about Ben Cross.
Yes.
Because, I mean, he is Barnabas, as John Carlin said, Barnabas is the man. So, now, a lot of people were tested for this role, apparently. I guess Armand Asante had come very close to nabbing it. Today, I just found out happenstance happens to be the birthday of Michael Crawford, who apparently was either lobbying for it or was up for the role. God love him. I'm not a Michael Crawford fan.
Well, I can tell you.
And I could not see him playing Barnabas Collins at all. I just can't see it. Armand Asante has that dark brooding thing, so I guess I kind of sort of can see that. But no, I'm sorry, no sex appeal with Michael Crawford. No.
I'm the only one present who saw twice Michael Crawford on Broadway in Dance with the Vampire. Trainwreck.
Oh, the musical version of the Sharon Tate movie, Fearless Vampire Killers. Yeah.
The blonde dude?
Yeah. Yeah.
The blonde?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
No.
Looking at it now, yeah, no.
No, would not have worked. Would not have worked. Also, I heard, and I can't see him as Barnabas, and I love him, told him to his face, Also told him that he helped induce puberty when I was 8 years old. Joe D'Alessandro was apparently under consideration for the role, which is interesting to me because Joe is sexy. The man exudes sex and he can exude fear. But he's Italian. He's got a very distinct, not to say that he can't speak classically, but I just think of him in Andy Warhol's Dracula, and I just envision him, showing up at the door, being like, is Elizabeth Collins started here? This is, some cousin Barnabas from England. It just, and I love Joe. Like I said, I love Joe, but I could see him more as a Willie Loomis type in the Johnny Carlin style of it. But as Barnabas, it just I don't know. I couldn't have seen him in that part. According to Kurt,
need a classically trained actor to do that to play most of those roles. And I think that came from Miss Parker. She said we were classically trained, most of us are stage trained. So those archetypes were what we were used to, and I think you can't get away from that. With
you have to have theatricality.
Yeah,
you have to have
yes.
You have to have theatricality. And Curtis said the minute I saw Cross, I knew he was the guy for the part. We were talking about this in the preamble, but it's not that I didn't like Ben. I actually thoroughly enjoy Ben as Barnabas Collins, and as the series goes on, which we'll talk about in the future episodes. But in the pilot, he's charming, but he's not necessarily likable. Jonathan was likable out the gate. There was something so charming, and there was even an innocence there, and you had pointed out the vulnerability.
Yeah. The thing is with Jonathan Frid, I think you go in, and he's talking to everyone in the couple because they didn't really have a pilot for him. In the first couple episodes, you get a genuine feeling, well, he comes out and says it, that he sees them as family. In fact, there's a point when he's getting dressed, and I can't remember if he's talking to Willie or if Julia's in it at this point. They said, well, where are you off to? And he said, I'm going to Collinwood. And one of them says something, and he says, maybe it's the beholden scene. These people are my family.
That's right.
They are my... And you get that sense from him that he's feeling his way around, but I think he's given the history of the character and what he went through before he was put in the box, there's got to be some sense of, I need these people. I kind of need a connection to, and having seen Elizabeth, and like he says in Night Whispers, Elizabeth, who looks so much like my mother, you get that sense from him. Ben Cross, you don't really have this kind of a warm regard for them. It's kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm going to have to destroy these people or if I'm, you don't get that. Roger and Barnabas hit it right off in the original series.
Very standoffish. Very standoffish. Right. And it's funny about, when he says right out the gate, he doesn't even wait, again, they didn't have the time to wait, but I'd like to restore the old house. And they're going back and forth, where, again, you and I love that take where he's like, I'll pay any rent you want me to. And, we wouldn't think of charging you rent. And they cut to Elizabeth saying, what you talking about, Willis? She's like, wait a minute. What do you mean he's not paying rent? But Roy,
hard look up.
A hard look up. And Roy Finnis is like, hey, if he wants to take it on, meaning we're not shelling out a dime for it, let him do it.
Right.
But Elizabeth is, as you pointed out, you made a good point. I want you to elaborate on that. She's smitten with Barnabas. Elaborate on that.
I think so. I think Joan Bennett was, or Jones Bennett's character was, in the sense of, this guy truly represents who we're supposed to be as a Collins. I think she even says that. He's everything a Collins should be. He's well-spoken, he's this, he's that, he's aristocratic and all that. So I think that her fascination is obvious. But there are different shots. And Gene Simmons was like you said, she was a film actress, so everything is kind of like right here. You see a lot right here. She looks very enamored of him, like when she sees him on the staircase. At first, she looks at him. She plays on different levels. At first, she's kind of like, "Oh my God, this is the real deal." Then there's like an attraction, And then and it's not, it's not in the pilot when he, after what the ordeal with Carolyn is over, and he comes to say he kisses her hand goodbye, and you can see that it's the look she gives him, that there's an attraction there. It's not just like she says in one of them too. It's you having you around is always a comfort, or having. Whereas Joan Bennett said at one point, "Help yourself. How many times do I have to tell you? You're never try. Come in as often as you want. How many times do I have to tell you that? You know, it's a cousin. It's a definite cousin relationship from the gate, from the get in the old one. With the new, I'm telling you, and I don't know if they said, look, this guy's a vampire. You're all gonna kind of get the kind of feeling of attraction to this guy. He's gonna ooze. He's oozing sexuality. Maybe have everybody in the room feel something for him, or if it was just, a very experienced film actress staging film doing her thing. But you really get the sense like I watched it last night. I was like, oh, that's awkward.
Even Elizabeth still has,
Yeah.
just because there's, what is it, snow on the roof doesn't mean there's no fire in the furnace.
I'm telling you. And I do think that they look like they could be family. Gene Simmons and Ben Cross actually look like they could be
and
mother
Adrian
and son,
and Adrian Paul. They did look like they all
yes,
came from. Yeah, we'll get to Adrian in a few episodes, but yeah,
yep,
they did look like.
surely will.
Yes, she could be their mother. Absolutely, absolutely. And actually,
Yeah.
come to think of it, there's even a little bit I'd say in Joanna Going, which would have been
Oh,
on purpose.
definitely,
Yeah, which would have been on purpose as well.
Interesting.
definitely. And I to the standoffish thing I'd mentioned, Roger and Bar. So in the original, Roger and Barnabas, man, they're together talking about a shipyard, and Roger's, let me look at that ring, and you're very intimate. I love it when he says, that's one of my favorite lines. You're very intimate with our family's history, aren't you? Our
Call it a
ancestors.
hobby.
I think that's it. I think that's such a sweet and endearing thing. You don't hear that with this. It's did you know the shit pipes in Cadogan Square? And no, 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 I didn't know. My business keeps me busy.
Yeah,
I don't, and it's a cold. No, my business consumes me or whatever. It's a
what
dismissive,
little and a little in
you
joke
know.
because I remember my mom and aunt laughing at that when they heard it. It's like my business has always been rather consuming. I mean, it's a little bit of an in
Oh,
joke.
consuming.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So they even tried to give
Ah,
Barnabas, yeah, the funny bone. They tried to give even Barnabas the funny bone there. Um, but yeah, he's. I found out last night that his first scene he ever filmed was where he kills Muscles and Gloria. That was his very first scene. He arrived at 4 in the afternoon for makeup. Um, it was filmed in an actual parking lot, and he didn't actually get onto the set until midnight. Temperatures were dropping, and he didn't finish filming until 3:30 in the morning. And if you look at Ben, who early on, I think Penny Dreadful pointed this out, Danielle pointed this out, he looks a little too healthy. He looks a little too tan out the gates.
so he is. He does.
Yeah,
Kelly fan.
Kelly, yeah.
Uh,
But in the parking lot, he does look very pale, like, I'm hungry. It's dinner time and I'm hungry. And you can see that he's been out in this condensation because even his hair is starting to really curl up. But that was the first scene
yeah.
that he filmed was where he kills Gloria. And I said to John, I said, I forgot. He bites Muscles on the neck, um,
Oh yeah.
which he couldn't
Brutal.
do back in the 60s until they got to parallel time. That's when he was allowed to, and you couldn't see him. He could bite Will Loomis on the neck, but you couldn't actually see him do it. We only see the scars.
Right.
You know what else was fascinating to me about that scene, and in fact, the revival was in the old series, you didn't always get the impression, maybe once or twice, of the strength that a vampire has, physical strength. Like, I know when they were in the graveyard with Laura, Jonathan forced Dirk to the ground, like, with no problem. He jumped up and he grabbed him by the shoulder and just put him on the ground. That was the only one of the few times you saw that out of the old, and I don't know how they would have demonstrated it in the original series anyway without lifting somebody off the ground or something. But then if you watch, this has a very Night Stalker vibe. So if you watch the original Night Stalker, Janos, he's tossing cops all over the place. He picks one guy up and slams him against the wall and throws him. You get that impression in that scene. He's got her pinned, and he grabs him by the throat and slams him against the van like he's no problem either. You didn't see that in the original. I know it was a little bit violent for Mr. Frid's taste, but you did get that kind of Night Stalker-y demonstration of strength
Only with
that
Willie.
you did not get in the original.
Yeah, only with Willie, like that,
Right.
that when he's got him by then, he like throws him across the living room. There's a scene in the old house where he really like gets him, and they act it so well that like Carolyn goes sliding across the floor. It's amazing that they didn't go out of frame, but they must have really choreographed that so well. But you're right, Cross does have the strength of 20 men. Especially in that scene. And then I love the fact, and Curtis mentioned this, that when the women get bitten, it's going to be sexual because it starts out as a scream and then she is going into full orgasm against that car. She is totally enjoying it.
True.
It's funny because it's true.
Oh yeah, and with Daphne, I mean, when he would go to visit Daphne, certainly also, it was not, it was a very sexual. This whole series was, and I guess it's the times, what they were allowed to do was much more sexual than the original was allowed to be. This was this was very 90s.
Curtis pointed it out. He said, we're definitely going to be sexier. We're not going to make it too overt, but we're going to be sexier. We're going to be bloodier. He's like, you can't put a stake in someone's heart and not have some blood pop up. Sometimes it did. I know that's what I was told, allegedly, why Jonathan watched most of the pilot but never tuned in again because, and he said himself, this was at the Thanksgiving Festival, 1991. He said, I just didn't understand why we had to see 30 quarts of blood every time he bit somebody. That was just boring to Jonathan. He's like, I don't understand why they had to show that much blood. There's also a video you can watch online. Jonathan was in Boston the night the show aired. And someone asked what his future was with his career. And he said, well, I guess it all depends on what happens tonight on NBC. They're saying if this series is successful, it's going to keep Dark Shadows out there. But he goes on to say, just from what I've seen in promos, that Ben is going along with Dan more than I did. He's more feral. He's much more feral than I was. And there's that. Yeah. Much more fierce than Jonathan would ever play on the series, not like what he did in House of Dark Shadows.
He has almost a Christopher Lee, which Christopher Lee didn't like. What he had been reduced to in the Hammer films, which was sort of like the red eyes, the fangs, and the hissing, summoning a girl. I mean, literally Ben Cross summons one of them outside by just standing and hissing at the window.
Well,
one of them.
Watch the end. That when you see the end of the pilot, after he has taken Vicky home, and he's just before Sarah calls out to him, that's right out of Curtis's Dracula with Jack Palance. He stole a lot from himself. I mean, between part 1 and part 2, there are scenes that are pulled right out of House of Dark Shadows. Camera angle for camera angle. They are pulled right of House of Dark Shadows. And that moment where Vicky goes to the window and he's looking up and he's going, which is a little ridiculous. But they do a shot it's Palance, I think, outside of Lucy's window or Amina's window. So he totally took that out, which for some people, even myself, I'm like, it just doesn't seem very Barnabas-like. Like Barnabas used to go and peer. Vicky would know that he was watching her. Not that it was him. She knew somebody was out in the woods. It's one of my favorite episodes, episode 289, when Julia is starting to put the pieces together. And the lights go out in Collinwood, and she starts questioning Vicky, and Vicky gets all, on edge, saying, what are you trying to imply about me and Mr. Collins? But the episode opens with, she's like, I'm pretty sure someone is out there watching me from the woods. And there's just Jonathan, but he's just kind of lurking. He's just kind of lurking behind the tree branches.
One of those deleted scenes with Carolyn and Vicky, the new one, and she says, "I think I saw somebody outside.
Yes.
I think I just saw somebody outside," and I think that's very creepy. I mean, especially this day and age of stalkers and all, that would be much creepier to have just somebody watching you from a distance.
It is a deleted scene, yeah, because she's like, you're in the boonies now, kid. You're going to have to get used to
Yeah.
stuff like like this. And she even howls.
Somebody's
She
gonna.
even she even
Yeah.
howls at her.
Carolyn. I just to bring up something really quick with Maggie. The new Maggie. One of the things I appreciated about her was that she was involved with the occult, and I
Yes.
liked that because it was kind of like an additional foil to what was happening with Angelique, and I kind of liked that involvement of hers. I thought that was a pretty cool twist.
And I thought, because we'll cover this in episode 2, I almost thought it was like they took Roxanne Drew, the psychic, and kind of melded them
Yeah,
together in a sense, saying,
I
"Well,
can
let's
see that.
give Maggie that. So we'll just cut to the chase and make that part of Maggie's makeup." So yeah,
Oh wow.
that was interesting. That was really interesting. I don't want to get into the other facet of Maggie until we do the next episode because I know it's something that bothers fans, but we're not going to talk about it tonight. Um, Roy Finnis is really good as Roger.
Hmm.
He's not that kind of. He doesn't have that haughtiness that Louis Edmonds had,
Right,
but he's got
right,
a pole. He's got a pole up his ass.
right. He's the spoiled younger brother,
Yeah,
which is Louis was supposed to be also, but Louis fit the wealthy boy of that era, that category, so very well. With his snifter of brandy all the time and that voice of his and all, all that kind of thing. But I like Ray Finnis. I think he does a uh, great job as Roger.
yeah.
Um, he, he's a lot less tolerant, I think, of David. But I think I got more of a sense that Louis Edmonds was trying and just couldn't understand the kid,
Yeah.
whereas you don't get that from at least what we were allowed to see before they got stupid and got rid of it. But
He says in the deleted scene with Elizabeth, I'm pretty sure it's in that scene, unless it's in the second episode. If if it would have saved her life, meaning Laura, I wish that he had burned to death and not her.
oh, that's right, that's right, right. Yikes!
And Elizabeth
You
is just
know,
like, what am I supposed to say to this? This is my nephew you're talking about. You're my brother and I love you. But the look on Gene Simmons' face is like, I can't believe you just said that.
do you find that Elizabeth, of all of the characters, is like her emotional buildup is like a universal across the board. Like what you said about David being her nephew, Elizabeth is the family, is the mother of the entire unit. Like I feel like Elizabeth in both series is the
The glue.
we talked about that conversation. Right, the conversation with her and David when she thought she was going to kill herself,
Yep.
and even this, and Gene Simmons trying to pull all of this together and keep David safe, and or keep David not from going insane and get the governess and all of that. I think that is a great constant in both shows.
Because the other deleted scene is at the breakfast table when he meets Vicky, and he's very like standoffish to her and kind of makes fun of her, like, "Oh yeah, I know you need to talk to children," and she's like, I guess looking like looking at Roger, she goes, "Okay, now I understand why David is the way he is."
Right. Shitbag. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a sweet moment between Vicky and David. Um, it is about halfway through, and she's putting them to bed, and she leans in to kiss him, and he pulls
And he
away.
pulls away.
I just thought that that was an interesting choice.
And they had
Hmm.
great chemistry
She
again.
says, "I'm here to be your friend." They were great together.
Yeah,
They were great together.
yeah. And he reminds you a little bit of David Hennessy. He's got the David Hennessy thing going on.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh huh.
Even though he won't speak about Dark Shadows.
No, he won't talk about Dark Shadows. He refuses to sign anything. Apparently, maybe he's changed, but he does not want to acknowledge Dark Shadows. At least it was what we heard for a long time. People would meet him at a stage door, and it's so silly to me. I don't understand what the big deal is, but he will not, unless it's changed, he will not acknowledge Dark Shadows. So, Joe, if you've changed your mind, we apologize, but I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's odd.
I also love Rebecca Stab as Daphne. Again, she kind of felt like, oh my God, I wish they hadn't killed her off. I knew they couldn't sacrifice Carolyn, but first of all, there's the backstory. Whose daughter is she? It's Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Roger, but clearly there's a sibling that died.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could she
I would like to have learned about that.
Could she what's her last name?
Collins.
So she could have been interesting.
So there had to be another sibling that, that died somehow, and otherwise why would she be there? And she relies on Daphne because she's like, here, Aunt Elizabeth, I have all the receipts and all of this and everything, Thank God there's one practical Collins in this world.
I wonder, I get this confused. So in reality, in the original series, Daniel was a cousin, not a brother.
Right.
So really, Roger and Elizabeth are not direct descendants in the line for Barnabas. They're cousins' children. So it's not like Barnabas or Sarah had a child. They weren't offspring of Sarah or him. They were the offspring of Daniel. Whereas in this one, Daniel was a sibling, the younger sibling of Barnabas. So they would have been more directly related. So I wonder then, no, there's only one. Huh.
Because Jameson,
like bloodline-wise.
Yeah, Jameson is Elizabeth and Roger's father. I'm pretty sure.
Father.
Yeah. Because if you figure, if he was 12 or 13 in 1897, and you do the math, if Elizabeth was born in 1910, which is when Joan Bennett was born, then it kind of evens out, I think. Unless my math is really off.
Right.
We have a comment.
No.
We have a comment from Gary Swafford. I just recently heard that Joan Crawford was approached to play Elizabeth, but she declined and suggested her friend Joan Bennett for the role. Do you know if this is true?
I believe that is a myth. That is a myth that Joan was, in fact, the first choice for...
Joan Bennett was the first.
Joan Bennett was the first choice for Elizabeth. Now, with the new series, Gene Simmons was one of several. One was Polly Bergen. Horrible lady, terrible lady, awful lady. Don't get me started on Polly Bergen. And then, drum roll, please. Do you know who the other person was, Michael? You should. June Lockhart.
Busy June.
Busy June was up for the role.
I can't see that. I love June, but I don't think she has the Dark Shadows vibe. All I would do, honestly, I wouldn't even, at that point, I probably would have been fascinated by that, but I would have just seen Hooterville, and that would have been it. I would have been thinking of Hooterville, and that would have been the end. June Lockhart. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Busy June. Busy.
Yeah.
Nah.
And I think other people...
Wasn't Catherine Lee Scott, or was that the 2000 where they wanted her to play Elizabeth? Weren't they talking to her about that?
I know she screen tested for the WB pilot for Elizabeth. Yeah, it went to Blair Brown, but she screened. I wish they had cast Catherine, even though it didn't go anywhere. I would have liked just to have had it on, tape. Would have been great just to have had her be a part of it again. And that brings up a bigger question about this series, which was Dan Curtis said, I refused any ideas for a reunion movie, a sequel. I don't see how you can do a new story for Dark Shadows. And this is where some of us as fans are coming from. You just take the pre-existing story and you do it over again. That's where he was coming from. He was not interested, nor did he think it was possible to do a brand new Dark Shadows. And Laura Parker said when I spoke to him, he said, I'd love to use you guys, but I'd have to write new stories for you. And, Laura went on to say the writing part, if anyone knows, is the harder part. And a lot of people said they didn't want Dark Shadows The Next Generation because there are a lot of people that didn't like Star Trek The Next, even though it was a hit. I know many Star Trek fans that do not like Star Trek The Next Generation.
Well, they're ridiculous.
Oh no, yeah, it was appealed to a different. I was not a big fan of the original. I mean, I did. I love Spock. Spock was my, but the new series was my series because of Patrick Stewart.
Yeah,
everything about Picard, like he was almost for me like kind of like not an antidote for Barnabas, but an antidote for Barnabas. Barnabas was handsome, and I mean, not saying Patrick Stewart wasn't good looking, but he was bald, and he felt more of an average person to me, whereas Barnabas didn't. So, that I don't know what his beef is. I think there's nothing but material, and I think that personally, from what I've seen of Miss Parker, how she looked in that, she could have probably played Angelique again. She didn't look.
Right.
Jonathan
She
Frid
didn't look her age.
She's an interesting lady. She doesn't age. Yeah. Jonathan Frid said she doesn't age. She's an interesting lady. She gets prettier.
Yeah, it was true. As in, if you saw her up close and in person, yeah, as we did, you would know that she just got more beautiful as she got older.
And naturally beautiful. Many times we stayed over, and in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning.
No, no makeup. Well, she didn't really wear a lot of makeup to begin with. She didn't need to.
Those eyes. Oh.
And when she was asked again at that Thanksgiving festival, they were like, "Well, what do you about the new series?" And she said, "I loved the new show. I wanted to be on it." She was, they had been promised, I guess, they said, if it continues, we'll start to weave you guys in as new characters. I think that's allegedly what was said to them. Although, and I'm jumping the gun here, Jonathan was offered to at least screen test, or Curtis, I think, maybe made the offer. Someone might correct me on this. To play Joshua. He thought it would be, it's a direct quote, "I wanted him to play Barnabas's father because I thought that would bring it full circle." And he said we couldn't make it work. And from what I understand, Jonathan just said, "Thank you, but no thank you." Louis Edmonds was also considered for the role to come back and play Joshua. But I think the studio was demanding a screen test and Louis didn't want to do it. Which it kind of sort of like...
It's absurd.
It's absurd to have made him screen test. And then Keen Curtis was also up for that role.
Who I love.
I don't know if John... I had thought the other day, I said, if we didn't have Stefan Gurash, we should get on to Professor Woodard. I think Johnny Carlin would have been great as Professor Woodard, and then coming back as Joshua in the flashback.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Stefan is a little... He's not terribly likable as Professor Woodard. I think he's a little creepy, actually. There's something about Professor Woodard that's a little creepy. Then they kill him off the same way they kill off Thayer in House of Dark Shadows. They rip that off. Only it's in the house and not out in the water. That's in part 2.
I think that's so incongruous with both characters. So I don't know if people who are not actors or who don't get into this whole aspect of acting, would... But Peter Cushing, in the end of Brides of Dracula, was to kill this vampire that he was fighting by opening up a spell book, and using a spell to conjure up a horde of bats to destroy this vampire. And Peter Cushing said, "Look, neither the suggested in the book nor my interpretation of Van Helsing would have seen him using occult means rather than the church to defeat Dracula, some sort of holy weapon or something." He said, so we had a jolly good fight, and that was the end of it. Terrence Fisher let it go. That's how I feel about when he said, "Oh, I would have killed him, Julia, but he chose eternal life." To me, Woodard, and I'm thinking the original, would have think you have to kill me. I'm not.
Right.
This is not. And the same with Professor Stokes. I think we see from Stokes from the series that he was hard headed and would have either devised a way out of it, or he would have rather died than become a vampire.
Yeah.
So I don't see that. I think that's just a crazy choice and the end of Dark Shadows, the movie, is the only thing I don't like about that movie. Is the whole town got bitten by that movie. That was just so silly to me. But
They're all vampires.
I don't see that as I mean, come on, except for Elizabeth, who went mad, who went catatonic. Um, I don't think either one of those characters, particularly the original Dr. Woodard.
Well, he says in The Office, he's like, I would much rather be dead than be what you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot about that guy.
Yeah. I would much. Well, there you go, Weezy. My little baby girl wanted to get in the shot there. So yeah, I don't, and of course is her tail still in the shot?
Yeah.
Haley Poe.
Now, Miss Hoffman, Dr. Hoffman. First of all, what an entrance. Stepping off the train, black trench coat, black umbrella, and man, does she make an entrance. She turns into that camera, those cobra-like cheekbones, very much like Grayson's. And that she always has this devilish grin on her face, the way she works those eyes.
Yeah.
She threw me at first, but she certainly grew on me by the end of the pilot and certainly throughout the series. How could you not fall in love with Barbara Steele? She was completely different than Grayson, but she works it, man. She really, really works it.
I agree with you. I think that first of all, her voice and that entrance of hers was right out of an old black and white
Noir
war film or Casablanca. Right out of the fog and the train and all of that. It was a grander entrance almost than Barnabas.
It's true.
It was a much. I love her in the piece. I love. She's tough like Grayson, but she doesn't. She has a vulnerable side too, and I like her relationship with Willie.
Yes.
As well.
Yes. Yes.
The two of them together, I think, is pretty cool. So, and I think she's great with Ben Cross. I think she handles. She's got that devious thing going, but she's not a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Barbara Steele is she's great from all those horror films too. I mean, you can't go wrong.
No, and Elizabeth, I mean, invites her to stay. She's like, well, there's no need for you to stay at the inn. You can come and stay with us. And I thought when I heard that, I said, I bet if we got to season 2, in order to keep her there, one, she could have very well worked at the local. She might have they might have brought Wincliffe into it. That would have been that. And then also, maybe they would have gone down the, I need, in order to help Barnabas, through whatever he was going through. It might have been the whole, I'd like to take some time off and write a history of your family.
Yeah. Something to keep her around.
They would have woven that into the story just to keep her there. But she almost walked off the set in the pilot because she and Curtis were going at it. And they had worked together all through Winds of War and War and Remembrance. And she says it in Master of Dark Shadows. She said, he was needling me. And she said, I don't need this. And basically walked off. And then that the crew applauded her.
She's got a great voice.
Barnabas, I must talk to you.
Her diction is great. The way she words things, everything about the way she talks is the way she speaks is wonderful. She's not good for you, Barnabas.
Well, first of all, when she takes out the medallion, the scene where just because Barnabas is in the house, Daphne is drawn to him. And she starts coming down the steps and passes out because obviously he wills her to pass out. thinking, oh my God, she's going to blow my cover. And she races up the steps and she sees the way Daphne's looking at him. And from the hypnotism session, the eyes, his eyes. And they get her right through the the banister. And she's locking eyes
Yeah,
with Ben Cross, and she's like, like in that moment, I know it. I know it. It's him.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's got to be him.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Why she looks in the mirror. Yeah, she's slick.
Yeah.
She's quite an intelligent lady.
Yes.
She and I love her. I know this is out of the pilot, but I love her as Countess Dupre.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yeah. She's got some really great. Yeah. Well, when we get to 1790, yeah, there's she's got some great one-liners as Countess Dupre too. She's great.
Great.
She's great. The jewels. You guys wanted to talk about the jewels, and I want to make sure we don't miss any
Oh yeah.
questions here. The jewels.
There's several comments that we should circle back around to. So the jewels, I find it really interesting that the jewels are in Barnabas's coffin. What would be the rationale for that? There wouldn't have been one. The rationale would be that Barnabas is hedging his bets, that God forbid I ever get woken up, I have access to capital. That's what I think.
I agree with
And
you.
and that Willie knew where to look. Poor baby just didn't look in the right place.
Yeah,
If
he
he had,
went for the hidden in plain sight.
yep,
You know,
yep. I also
I
noticed.
you know it's go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, Michael, you first. You first.
The my favorite of the audio dramas, Fire and Ice.
You
So
said.
it's really about Joshua, Naomi, and Laura. Angelique goes back in time and observes all of this, like the foundations of what you find out in there is that the pirate that they talked about that gave the family the jewels was actually in love with Abigail, and their father, who was
Oh,
played in the audio drama by Mitchell, by Mitch
Mitri-
Ryan. He
Mitrian.
played the he played Caleb Adam, Collins, the father of Joshua Collins, and Abigail forbid her to be with him because of his reputation. And the pirate was actually played by James Storm, but he gave those jewels to. They were actually Abigail's. The family, all of those pirated jewels. He was killed in a storm out at sea, but he made sure that she got them.
wow.
Abigail got the jewels. But I thought, what a wonderful way to bring that. That's such a shame because it brings weight to this. They explain why Abigail is such a hard ass in the series. Like she was in love and she was denied love by her father, who was very much like Joshua, and it's really adds a little bit to that, a little bit of fun to the whole family jewels thing and all of that. Which of
Yeah.
course the whole family thing is interesting, you know.
Because in the original show, we see the trunk you and I have talked about, which they use the same chest. They use the same kind of chest for the
Right.
jewels. But we don't quite know. The only thing we know is that Barnabas, whenever he go, and even in 1897, he's, I know why Sandor came to the crypt, but I know where the
Yeah.
jewels are. But we never quite
Right.
know. We never quite see where they've been. And I guess every time Barnabas does go into another time warp, he's got to pray that those damn jewels are where they were left.
Have not been ripped off. That's right.
Yeah. But
He
it's a
shows
great,
up with that necklace.
with that necklace, it's a great moment. And I noticed in watching last night, first of all, we've got to talk about Robert Cobert because he reinvented a lot of the music. He kept a few pieces, including what's known as Maggie's theme. You hear it in the series anytime we see the Evans cottage or Maggie at the inn. It's a very specific piece of music. It even opens the picture of Dorian Gray. They reutilized it for the opening of that. When Barnabas comes in to defend Willie, when they're questioning him, which is a really well played scene because Vicky is being so sweet because they're being so nasty to him. And she's like, give him the benefit of the doubt. And even Barnabas comes off as being, very, very sweet. They kind of truncate all of that stuff where Elizabeth is saying, I want you to fire Willie Loomis immediately.
Yeah, yeah. You start to like him then a little
Yeah,
bit more, Barnabas,
yeah,
because of his defense of Willie and all of that kind of thing. Well, you're right about the music that I like that they played with a lot in this series was it's called Darkness at Collinwood,
Yeah.
that they had running throughout the whole show. They play with that a little bit, and the two times I can think of is when Sarah dies, little Sarah dies, or when Barnabas is recently cursed, and it's a very soft version of that, very sad, soft version. And when he bites Abigail, they thunder it. Bum, bum, bum. I love that. So I thought that was really great that they toyed around with that a little bit and kept it.
And Colbert said Curtis drove him crazy because he said he would look at the scripts and he wanted music like he loved music and he's like, Dan, do you know how much music you're asking me for? This stuff doesn't just write itself.
Big enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
he did a brilliant job.
Oh, he did a wonderful job. And we hear like a reworking of the Dream Curse music that's in there. And I noticed when Willie is on the floor of the mausoleum bleeding, when they cut to Willie, it's the bam that we always hear whenever they open up the doors to parallel time and the room changes. Go back and you'll hear it. It's that kind of dum. It's that same music that they play anytime anyone opens the doors to do a reveal.
Oh my God, I never even picked up on that. That's one of my favorite parts too, when he just steps over Willie.
Yeah.
Willie's just laying there weak and drained, and he just walks right over this thing.
Yep. Now that was...
now I have a question.
Yes.
You two, you're very observant. Does Ben Cross's ring change? Because in the first episode, it just looks like a plain wide band with a cat's eye shaped cabochon onyx, and he's got the little beads around it. But then later on, we get that full, thick, broad fleur-de-lis band, which is really excellent. But I feel like it evolved into that. I don't think that was the way it was in the pilot. Anyone?
It's definitely like here. This is Jonathan's kind of ring, which they didn't go for at all. They went for an onyx ring, but I noticed it too. The ring is not the same from the pilot to the series, and there was a gap. Right. Several departments, including costuming, did change between the pilot because those people got other jobs, and so some of those people had to be newly hired to take over what needed to be done. And I think when you're doing that, another totally noticeable thing, and we all hated it, was the pilot Josette portrait. Nobody liked that portrait. It was a full portrait of her standing in front of a terrace. And I wish I had it to pop up. It's online. Cy Thomasoff, they went to his original drawings, and it was between a full figured portrait of Josette or a Josette just sitting there in front of a velvet backdrop. And that's what they went with for the original series. When the series got picked up, apparently, I guess complaints got back to them. And so they said, we need something that's more along the lines of the Josette portrait from the original series. And you get that really beautiful picture of her just from the waist up.
It doesn't look like a Harlequin novel. It actually looks like everybody's family had one. Well, at least the Italians. Those Tupperware pictures of the little French boy and the little French girl. It looked like the little French girl with the floral background. It was like,
we had it.
Man.
We had it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, every Italian family.
We had it.
Just it's just terrible. No, I'm with everybody on that one.
Yeah, Josette's. 1,000%. It was awful. Josette's portrait was awful. Although my parents tried to bid on it for me when it was auctioned off. We didn't get it, but they tried.
We actually have some comments about people who won auction items from 91 series.
Oh yeah, well, and we're not bringing our loot out tonight, but I just made a recent acquisition, which I have to be more clear to the universe with what I want. Although I'm happy to have this, I have something that was used on the show in the second episode, and I have something that's very pivotal to the show that was mass manufactured. But we're not going to bring those out until later episodes. But what are the questions they have?
So, a friend of ours has the coat and the ring, doesn't he?
Jimmy.
a good friend of ours. Yeah, he's got the
Jimmy
coat and the ring, doesn't he?
Jimmy had the coat and the ring, as far as I know. Yeah, and they just auctioned Ben Cross's cane off in California this past year.
Can we talk about that cane for a moment? He beats the hell out of that. My poor cane. He drops it. He beats. You can see him beating Willie with it. He whacks a guy in the jaw with, which I thought that was kind of cool though. When he's first set loose and he whacks the guy, side whacks the guy coming after him after biting, I guess, the Maud Brown character.
Gloria,
But he
Gloria.
beats the hell out of my cane. Yeah. My poor cane.
Well, you and I both, it's funny, John uses it because he has to. You and I see it as a piece of movie, television history. So we're very, very careful with our canes. John's cane actually looks like what Barnabas's cane would have looked like after all that abuse.
It has fallen so many times.
Ours is more like a relic.
Ours is but we've got to upload it. Guys, if you can find it, it's very hard to find. When MPI still owned the NBC series, which is important because in the VHS tapes, this is glaring. And John and I talked about it last night. If you watch it on YouTube, they filmed nighttime sequences during the day and used a filter. It's never a great idea. Whoever put this up on YouTube went back in, and it really looks like daytime in all of the nighttime scenes. It's bad. This is for the, I think, the DVD release, but it's not that way in the VHS tapes. On the VHS tapes that MPI released, it does look the way it did when it aired on television. And even then, it was a little sketchy. This is really bad. And we don't have a Blu-ray release for this series yet. So hopefully we get a Blu-ray release and they restore those scenes back to making them look more like nighttime. Because whenever you do daytime during nighttime, it really doesn't work all that well. And this is bad. This is really, really bad.
I
need more than closing the shutter.
Right.
I can't put up the Facebook comments. We can only see the YouTube comments.
Okay.
But there's a couple of people have brought up the fact that Sam Evans is now running the Blue Whale.
Owner of the Blue Whale. Yep.
And what did you think of Sam, the character actor who played Sam Evans?
Well, he's in a league of their own. He's
yeah.
Oh, whose father is he? Is he Rosie's father? No.
No, he's the father of.
Oh, the really like
Exactly.
Yeah, he's her father. He wasn't utilized. He's a wonderful, God rest him, he's gone now, but he was a wonderful character actor, and they didn't utilize Sam in the same way that they did the first time around. So he was underutilized.
Isn't it risky having Sam Evans behind a bar?
Well, funny I
didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that.
I thought about it because here he's lecturing Willie on alcoholism.
Right.
He refused. So now he's a totally different Sam Evans.
The tragedy about that was one of the cooler things about the old, that when he was doing the portrait of Barnabas, I thought again that is something they should have done maybe later down the line, because the artist in the new series is
Roger. Well,
and Laura.
And Laura. Well, he's painting. That's, they're always Vicky. Well, again, we'll get to this in the next one. But Vicky stumbles upon his painting room.
Oh, I misunderstood. Well, I love the whole Barnabas portrait thing, and I'm sorry they didn't do that with Sam.
Yeah, totally.
That was great. Great interchange. A really creepy in with him and Maggie. I mean, very creepy in. So I'm sorry they lost that. I guess the time forbid.
Right. Oh, they were totally pressed for time because, well, first of all, out the gate, Sarah is a fixture at Collinwood. She's already friends with David. So they bypassed all of that. And Sarah blows the horn on Barnabas out the gate. David says to Vicky,
he's not a good person.
He's not good. Sarah told me he's not a good person. Whereas she only broadly hints about Barnabas. She never gives Barnabas away in the original series. But in this one, I'm like, I forgot. She totally tells David, no, you can't trust him.
And how sad is that? Like, how sad is that we've talked about Sarah being sad in the past, just in general. Her character is deeply sad, but how sad is it that he really doesn't get a chance? I do love the different exchange in the end with her and he when she says, "You've got to stop trying to hurt people who want to help you. Not everybody is bad." I do like that differently than "You'll never see me again until you knock it off," and then she just goes away and she never comes back. You know.
Right.
But the end when he's chasing her, that's another thing I love that they did with this series.
Yes.
And I guess because they had the tech capabilities, that echo when he screams, "I cannot help
Help
myself."
myself.
I think that those sound effects were very well used in the new series, particularly that end. It's very gripping and very sad.
Unlike House of Dark Shadows that was done without Jonathan's knowledge. And you're wondering, pardon my French, guys, I hope no kids are watching this. What the fuck is he saying at the end? All we can get is Clark.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He turns him into one of the parents from the Charlie Brown cartoons. It's
Yeah.
you can barely
Yeah.
understand what he's saying.
Yes, that is a
Yeah,
little bit. I didn't know he didn't know that they did that to him.
they did it in post.
Uh,
And Jonathan said, he said, he came to me and said with the final cut, he said, we changed the ending a little bit, Jonathan, and I know you're not going to like it, but we find it very effective. And of course, Jonathan said you couldn't understand a word I was saying.
that all of that blood and all of that yeah, they really. I don't know. I don't see that much in this though. I don't see that happening in this series. As far as
No,
him getting killed,
no,
in the end, I don't think that. I do think the scenes with. I think that Ben Cross and Joanna Going had great chemistry from the very beginning.
totally,
Moving, into the thing. Their chemistry together was really great.
totally.
Um,
It's when he first
Very
sees her,
romantic. It was good.
when David
Yeah,
runs in. What I don't like in that scene is the way he treats David, because right out the gate, whereas Jonathan actually was very sweet with David until David started to realize that he wasn't, all he was cracked up to be.
yeah,
When it's you can't do that. It's Sarah's house, and he sneers at him, and he's like, "And who is this, Sarah?"
yeah. That was an interesting choice to me too. Well, I think that kind of if because Cross said he'd never seen the original, right? He said he'd never seen the original series.
Curtis
So
wouldn't let him. Curtis wouldn't let him.
I think that's a kind of because Barnabas was so forlorn over Sarah that having a reaction like that is completely out of character because he sees the portrait
Right.
and dismisses the kid. And I agree with you. He is very cold with David, whereas Barnabas says, "Oh, you're my cousin," and all of this, and they talk about the old house and all of that. They have all this exchange, and this is what never happened. In fact, I don't think they have any more interaction. Barnabas and David. I know Barnabas and Daniel do, but I don't think Barnabas and David in the length of the series.
No. No.
Yeah,
No, because all of David it's Sarah. Sarah keeps tipping him off. Sarah, and
yeah,
then Vicky has, unlike Carolyn, they reversed it a little bit. Again, that's going down a couple of episodes, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, then he apologizes. He gets like a little woozy almost, and he's like, "I really hope I didn't upset the boy." It's kind of like he realizes
yeah.
that he made a blunder.
Cool your jets.
Yeah, this is not going to get me in good with Elizabeth. They've already given me the house.
Right. Exactly,
and
exactly.
and
Yeah,
while we're on that
it's.
subject, go ahead, Michael. You go. You go ahead.
I think that Barnabas, as the protector of the family, is crucial. I think that because he's down the line, he's going to do some. I would have hoped they would have done some very big time traveling things to save that family and some other important things. You can't have him not being nice to the kid. You can't have him being, overtly hateful. So, you know,
I don't know if this has come up with questions, but I'm going to bring it up. The house. The house and the old house. This is where things got really cheap in my opinion. I don't mind Greystone as Collinwood. I don't mind it. I do wish they had, and there's a little tower in there, but not much. It's gothic. It's scary. It was. They had a better budget for the WB pilot because they really dressed it up. Because in fact, in the WB pilot, which we'll do a whole episode on, they did have two separate houses, and Collinwood was the old house. Because when you're in the old house, that is actually the main room of Greystone. That staircase, that beautiful oak staircase. All of the scenes in the old house are actually the main part of Greystone. And they cover the entryway up with a red curtain. Whereas in the WB pilot, everybody walks through that and down the stairs. That is Collinwood, and they dressed it up with coats of armor and antiques and all kinds of stuff. The Collinwood Great Hall, because Dan really wanted a great hall, is, for you Downton Abbey fans, it's a replica of the Downton Abbey Great Hall line for line. The archways, the staircase, everything that they built, and it apparently is still the most costly set ever for a pilot.
Wow.
Is that replication of Highclere Castle for the Collinwood set, which was on a soundstage. Everything at the old house is in Greystone Mansion, but everything in Collinwood's Great Hall and that little kind of living room area where they meet Barnabas, that is a set on the Warner Brothers studio. And what I was told or read is that when it was dropped, before they picked it up, that set was demolished and it had to be rebuilt all over again.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how apocryphal that is, but yeah, because the new show cost them apparently $120 million for the 13 episodes.
God.
And we'll get more into this later on, wigs. Roy Finnis's Reverend Trask wig, which was handcrafted, was $5,000. The hairstylist said you can get wigs for $50 to $100. They were spending so much in other areas, it came to a point where NBC said, you cannot leave Greystone Mansion. Whatever you have to film, you cannot leave Greystone. It all has to be on the grounds of Greystone or on the set that you built over at Warner Brothers, but you cannot go anywhere else anymore. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was getting very expensive, and I know the creative team said he wanted it to be like a movie. And he wouldn't compromise with them sometimes. He was so determined that every episode looked like a major motion picture. So to a degree, that I think worked against him a little bit. But I didn't mean to cut you off, Michael.
Oh, no,
they could have used the house that was used for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It bears a striking resemblance to the old house and it's in Beverly Hills. Or the governor's mansion from Benson in Pasadena. Either one of those houses would have been perfect as the exterior for the old house. That has the big, what do you call that, portico?
Yep. The
big portico and the columns. Either one of those houses would have been perfect. And my fervent hope is if they go ahead with this sequel series or a new series, that they will use one of those houses so that it at least resembles what the old house is supposed to look like. Because that was the biggest. It's just the back. It's the back of Greystone.
Yeah, it's obvious. It's to me they skimped. That's the wrong thing to skimped on.
Yeah.
The old house. We've talked about this before. The houses are characters in the show. I mean, they had their own things going on, their own tunnels, their own thises, their own that's, and it was a mistake to and the fact that it was a Greek colonial was indicative of the family and the all of that kind of thing. And I think it was just a model. I would have been happy with a model, at least of the outside, that showed all we ever saw of the outside really was little bits and bobs of it and covered in ivy. And I mean, it was obviously to hide the fact that it was indeed not the X-Men mansion. I mean, but Yeah, that was the wrong place to skip it. You
I
need
did
those.
I
Yes.
did see the model for Collinwood because when you see the opening shots, WD, I just saw that. I want to
It's so funny
definitely.
you say that because he bid on the model.
So um, they did create a model. I saw it in person in California in 1996. It was my first California convention. It was 25 feet long by 15 feet deep. And they had it on display. So everything you see in the opening shots and the nighttime exterior shots is the model of Greystone. They even went out of their way to make it look like it was on a cliff. And you can see that. And then they were
Mm.
piping in mist around it. And it was auctioned off. I don't know how anybody got that out. Hopefully they didn't have to travel with it. Um, by the point that was, let's see, 5 years after the show went off the air, it was pretty weather beaten by that point, but it was pretty cool to see it. And about a year after Dark Shadows went off the air, I wasn't a fan of the series. It was a series called Goosebumps, based on the Goosebumps books. And I'll be damned, I did a double take. There is a stock shot of Collinwood from Dark Shadows that they're using to be this scary mansion, and then they cut and they're actually inside Greystone.
How funny.
So the person must have been a fan, whoever did the series, but they wound up using it later on.
Do you know what I hated about the old house also? I mean, I did the fireplace was great. I loved the fireplace. The staircase was cool. What I did not like is when you go down into the basement where the coffin was, you see all kind of like you'll see like electric boxes and like wiring, like things like that. And I'm thinking Barnabas didn't have electric in the house. Doesn't like why are those? What's this? All you could have hidden those, or
Oh
just
no.
not shot right there.
Oh no, you couldn't have, because if you told Curtis that, he'd say, they're not looking at that. They're paying attention to the story. They're never going to notice that. That was his
No.
stock answer to all of it.
The coffin room, you see the circuit breaker panels.
Even when
Yeah,
they,
and it's like, what the hell?
because
You got candles everywhere.
I said to John, I said, are we to believe that somewhere at the turn of the century, someone came into the house and lived there briefly and did put electric in? I don't know. WD, was that, okay, you won it in 1996. So I was at that convention. That was my first California convention. And I remember them auctioning off, it was the Chard, right? It's when she's doing the, all the fire is popping up out of it.
When she brings
That's
Jeremiah from the dead, right?
exactly. All right, that's what you own. That is so cool. I remember them auctioning that off. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff got auctioned off. They auctioned off both of Josette's portraits.
Gary's asking, was the 96 Fest in New York City, 30th anniversary?
96 was in California. I know that, Gary, because it was my first California festival, my first time on a plane. And I was so excited to be there. I fell in love with California. I didn't want to leave, as my husband will tell you. Never wanted to leave California. Oh, you're the same way, right, Michael? You and me both, right?
Oh,
Um,
oh God.
they auctioned off Jeremiah's portrait. They auctioned off another piece of memorabilia that this one tried to get for me. Came very, very close. But as someone once said, if you wish hard enough and dream long enough, wishes come true. And I won't say any more about that until a future episode.
Interesting. And Dr. Valerie Pronio, now Dr. Valerie Storm, beat me out how many times at auctions? She
But not for that.
No, not for that.
That was a woman from Kentucky that won what I wanted.
I know.
Yeah, I know. And you came so close. No, John got Dan Curtis's personal address book.
I did.
From the time of the series, which we eventually sold, although we have a photostatic copy of it. So we have all the addresses somewhere of where everybody lived, including Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro's address and telephone number from the 60s was in Dan Curtis's address book. It was like a little black address book.
Yep.
And
we have a few new
I believe my husband was get this. My husband was crazy enough. He's not even as big a fan as I am of the show. He paid, I believe, $1,100 for that goddamn address book.
It was a different time.
No, he was working in corporate America. He was a VP. We had more disposable income at the time. But then I tried to I raised my hand for the pier that dinky Barnabas coffin was on. And Beth Hyde Hood, God rest her soul, grabbed my hand, put it down, and said, "Are you out of your frigging mind? It's a piece of wood. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to get it home on the plane? Keep your hand down."
This was the Ben Cross coffin, or the
original? The Ben Cross. And not even the coffin. It was just the pier that it was on.
That's wild.
But I got caught up. I got caught up. 1993. I meant to say this. Barbara Blackburn, who played Carolyn and Millicent, and Roy Finnis, who played Roger and Reverend Trask, they came to that festival. Two sweeties. Two absolute sweeties. Roy Finnis, just one of the nicest men you could ever meet. Barbara Blackburn, who, funny enough, I don't know how many people know this, was in acting class with Nancy Barrett when she got the part. She was taking acting classes with Nancy Barrett, and if it like said, "I'm going to be playing the role that you originated." So how's that for a little roundy? And she auctioned off Millicent's blood-stained nightgown from when Barnabas attacks her. It still had all the blood on it. And a very nice gentleman named Jack actually won that nightgown.
We have some new audience members. Eric Vasquez loves Dark Shadows, 66 to 71. Good show. You have a lot of good taste. We have Andrew O'Connor. Hello, Andrew. And we have Jammin' Jay, who says the 91 incarnation of Dark Shadows was my initiation to the series, and I loved it. It felt so special and unique, and unfortunately it wasn't given a chance. I wanted so many more episodes. We agree with you, Jammin' Jay.
We totally agree with you, Jammin' Jay, and we'll get more to that because they really did get screwed over. But again, even out the gate, Tartikoff begged him to bring the show back. They did a pilot. He was guaranteed. We were talking about this during the preamble, John, Michael, and myself. 2 days later, after they said they weren't going to use it, Tartikoff comes back to him and says, "All right, we're going to air it, and we're going to give you 5-episode commitment." And Curtis was like, "I cannot tell a story of this scope in 5 episodes." So he really had to bargain with them. And knowing Curtis, he got very colorful with his language to get the 13 episodes that we got. And for my money, if he could have gotten those 26 episodes like he did in 1966, we would have gotten so much more story because there's so many elements of 1967 that get thrown by the wayside because they had to get into the past so quickly, which we'll talk more about at a later date. That was a very sticky situation, but there's so many elements of the 1967 storyline that I miss. I mean, I'm sure you did too, Michael, because I know we both love that storyline so much.
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. Well, the whole Dr. Woodard fight should have been dragged out a lot more.
Yeah.
We just talked about his death going in the wrong direction. There should have been a Burke Devlin. That's a huge loss.
Totally.
That was a huge loss, which is nobody's fault, just the timing of the show. So Joe Haskell was a great character that didn't really get too much as he should have. Michael
T. Weiss. Talk about and he is the boy next door in this, except when Daphne, well, that's part 2, but I mean, Michael's a wonderful actor. On top, he's just a beautiful man. he was perfect for the part. He had that same thing that Joel Crothers had. He gave off that good old hometown boy, wants to settle down with Daphne, wants to, he really got. I was so sad with what we're too far off on that as to what happens to him. But
Right.
I really liked him, and I liked him as Peter Bradford as well. Again, that's going down a ways, but
Yeah, I did too.
yeah. But he was. I liked him a lot. Again, I didn't really have issues with any of the casting. I think the one that threw me the most was Willie because it was such a different approach to what Carolyn had been.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he grew on me.
Yeah.
And he
You
made
feel
me.
his devotion to Barnabas. He feels very devoted to Barnabas. And he tells him, "I'd do anything for you," which I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. It's not take exception. I take notice of that part because
Sure.
I think there's some double entendre there that in the 90s you could have only done that way. In that era you could have only done it by like a light hint, whereas if they'd done it today, it could be more than a hint. Hence, Interview with a Vampire. If you've
Well,
not seen that
also,
series,
no, we definitely want, and I got to read the book. I
It's
have
on
to
the
read the book.
list.
But let's bring it back to Fright Night, 1985, which is now celebrating its 40th.
Joel Crothers was a lot of people's first crush.
Oh, Gary, you and me both. Yeah,
we
Joel.
agree.
Joel was, and we have friends who knew him back in New York and just said he was a nice. On top of being a nice guy, like when you saw him in person, you were just like, oh my god. Even Estelle Getty, who worked with him in Torch Song Trilogy off Broadway, she used to jab him all the time about, you little son of a bitch. no one's allowed to be that good looking. So yeah, he was a good looking guy and a good actor. Joel was a very good actor to go from
oh yeah,
good boy to Nathan Forbes. He had the range.
Can we talk about the white pants?
Oh yeah, the gabardine pants, which, well, Keith Prentice was. I'll tell you, man. I mean, Keith used it as his calling card because I remember watching the 1841 episodes with John, and John's looking at the screen and at those pants, and I said, "Isn't that nice that he brought his dachshund to work with him?" Left nothing to the imagination. And even Joel a couple of times I think was going commando in those gabardine pants. So hey,
Speaking of Michael T. Weiss, you see him almost naked in Jeffrey.
well, you see him shirtless in the second part of the pilot with Daphne. We'll get into that. But there was something. What were we talking about before we went down? Fright Night. Celebrates its 40th anniversary this year, 1985. And, it's not apocryphal that because they were doing an homage to the various vampire movies, Chris Sarandon and David Selby are very good friends. And I believe David made the suggestion, why don't you have the girl resemble someone that Jerry once knew? And that's where the portrait came into it. It was a suggestion from David Selby.
Got it.
That they add that into the story of Fright Night. And after Charlie Brewster gets him with the pencil in the hand and flies back home, and their windows abut, and you see Jonathan Starker, who I love. Jonathan Starker is a funny man. He is just hysterical. Go to his Facebook page. It's called The Real Billy Cole. That's his Facebook page. And there he is. He's the Willie Loomis, and he's mending the hand. And he gets down on his knees in front of Jerry, massaging his palm. And then the shade goes down. And Chris and Jonathan didn't take any notice of it. He said, we did the scene several times. And Tom said, like, Billy, Jonathan, would you mind getting down on your knees in front of him. And he's like, I didn't think anything of it until I saw the final cut of the movie and went, holy Moses, clearly Billy Cole would do, we thought with Jerry is and we see it with Evil Ed. We see it with Evil Ed. He is an equal opportunity bloodsucker,
Hunter.
so to speak. Yes.
A.G. Lewis writes, I didn't realize Fright Night was turning 40 this year.
Yeah, 1985. Yep. So
that's crazy.
I know.
I feel so old.
I think I saw it when they came out on V. I didn't see it in the movies. I was too young, but my grandpa rented it for me like in 1987. So I think that's the first time I saw it. And I fell in love with it. I love Fright Night. Well, Roddy alone is worth the price of admission.
100%.
Absolutely, that's one of my favorite all time. The signet ring wasn't that David Selby's idea too? That he should have a signet ring.
Probably, I wouldn't be a bit surprised. I know about the portrait. I know that the portrait was David's idea, and Chris has affirmed this. Because he visits groups online from time to time that was David Selby's idea. It's a good idea.
That's wild. Oh. Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So,
yeah.
The pilot is, I enjoyed it. And it only gets better from there on. So you're so happy that they did pick it up. So there's so much more to discuss. It does end. I kind of like the way it ended with him in anguish. Again, showing that side of him. And as you said, I can't help myself, which is the crux. That's really, in a way, an homage to Jonathan Frid, without, I think, unwittingly, that I'm really not a bad person. I'm not a bad person. It's not my fault. So it ends on a bittersweet note. A bittersweet note.
Barnabas is more akin to the Frankenstein monster than he is to Dracula. Karloff always said, he didn't choose to be created. He didn't choose to be made this way. He didn't choose to be monstrous or brought back from the dead. He's dealing with all of this as an outsider. You see that in Barnabas. You don't see, and which was Jonathan Frid's decision. He didn't want to do it he didn't want to be that guy. He wanted to be a guy with a problem.
And the Wolfman. He doesn't want to be the way, it's a curse that he can't control.
Exactly.
So all of that stuff figures into it, and it is kind of nice that it ends on that note. Gives the audience, and I've got to mention this. We talked about the cape and the cane and the ring. The only thing we didn't get, which I know we all talked about with Penny, was we've talked about future Dark Shadows. The bangs. We have to have the bangs.
Yeah.
I think and I can appreciate it because with my mohawk, it's a little harder to tell. But now that I'm approaching 40 from the wrong direction, I'm starting to get that Ben Cross hairline. And unless they had put a wig on him, that hairstyle would not have worked. Because he was a handsome man, and he did a vampire movie, I think, just after a comedy movie called Nightlife.
Blood something or other for Nightlife. It was a cable movie, wasn't it?
Yeah. USA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
USA.
And they flattened his hair, and I was like, oh, that's such not a good look for him.
He's got a very long face. He's got a very long, gaunty, kind of almost more like a Peter Cushing shaped face. The high cheekbones and the thin the jaws and all that kind of thing. I agree with you. I think too, what I think is so cool about this stuff with Barnabas is it's the throwback. He had that Lord Byron kind of look, and he kept it. He stayed. That's the thing about the cape, the cane, the ring, the bangs. They're all tie-ins to his time.
Yeah.
And I think that you like the no electricity. Those are all really cool aspects of that character. Those are the things that people like about Barnabas. He was true to himself, true to his era, true to his family, true to trying to stay a human being. If you toss all that stuff, you really make him kind of an everyman, and nobody wants an everyman for a vampire.
No,
We all
no,
want something a little different.
yeah,
So, please don't toss that stuff.
no. With whatever might get done, and
Yeah.
I think this series, because when fans say, "Oh my God, why are they going to do it again?" They already did it again. Well, not really, because we only got 13 episodes,
Oh yeah, and the movie was a bomb,
and the movie
an
is
abominable.
its own
Well, it's its
beast.
own universe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
parallel,
look at
parallel
it
universe.
separately. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it does need a fair shake. It needs a fair shake on a good network with a good amount of time
How
and a good cast.
how would you rate, as we wrap this up? How would you rate the pilot for the NBC Dark Shadows if we were going to give it on a scale of 1 to 5? What would you give it?
Honestly, a 4 or 5. I really,
Yeah,
really liked it.
I'd give it.
I
I'd give it
really,
like
really
a 4.5.
feel the love.
Yeah, yeah. How about you, John?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So I think we're all agreed. It's a 4.5. Um, if you want to
Yeah.
know more about the series, guys, I know that you can still get Dark Shadows Resurrected. It might be on Catherine Lee Scott's website. And again, Jim Pearson, who's been helping to keep the legacy alive all these years, put this book together. There's some really wonderful stuff and photos. There's great photos. And then Shadows in the 90s is by Kathy Resch. This, I believe, is out of print now, but you could probably find it on eBay. So check those out. We will be back this week. Let's make an agreement here, guys. We got to meet one night this week, and we're going to cover from the next episode, I think, up until Vicky goes back to 1790. How about that?
Sounds like a plan.
All
Very
right.
well.
So I want to
I'm in, baby.
great. I want to thank Michael Panzerato, my other half,
Oh,
DJ
no.
Schaefer. And remember, guys, please hit like and subscribe on YouTube. Doesn't cost you anything and helps us a lot. Continue to leave comments. We will answer your comments there on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook page. And I can't stress enough if you
Really quickly, Gary
Yes.
Swafford. Yes, there is a new series in the works. It is being written and jobbed out by a gentleman named
Mark B. Perry. Mark B. Perry has written a sequel series that was sanctioned by the Dan Curtis estate. Those are his two daughters. This would bring the show into the now. But Mark is such an uber fan. He said in an interview with Penny Dreadful, he wants it to look like the old show. Collinwood will look like the Collinwood you remember. The old house will look like the old house that you remember. The music will be utilized because he's a fan, so he's going in the right direction. He said we're going to veer off and do some other stuff that you didn't see, but it will, in fact, it will look like the Collinwood and the Collinsport that you remember. So there's that. Right now, Catherine Lee Scott is on an excursion with Mark B. Perry. She posted yesterday. So that gives me hope that maybe there's some movement on this series. And with her fiance, she and her fiance Patrick have announced they're getting married in June.
Mazel Tov.
And in July, she will be hosting a 2-day event at Lyndhurst Mansion, which we're really looking forward to going to. Because there were a lot of East Coast fans that didn't get to go to LA this past year. So this is a July 19th and July 20th at Lyndhurst Mansion. Q&As with her. Dollars to Donuts. Our friend Marie Wallace is going to be there and some other surprise guests. So keep your eyes posted for that. July 19th and 20th at Lyndhurst Mansion, a Dark Shadows event with Catherine Lee Scott and company. And I think that's it.
That is it.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope your new year is off to a good start. Have a wonderful Martin Luther King Day tomorrow. And we will talk this week more about the shadows.
I am with you. I love that.